to the Gabriel-Saliba relationship where someone does take on the sort of responsibility for possession. But eventually you want two centre-backs that can do that. And I do wonder whether that's maybe something they're considering.
That might be the case long term for Newcastle, but let's remember that their primary goalkeeper when he's fit is Nick Pope, so they're a long way off from doing that at the moment. I think they want to be more dynamic. You see the players that Eddie Howe's brought into the team in terms of his fullbacks, in terms of his wide players, the likes of Anthony Gordon. They're a team that move the ball quickly up into the final third. I think Mark Guehi can do that. We've seen him do that not only for Palace, but do that for England as well. And so I understand your point in terms of they want to be more progressive, but I think Mark Guehi can fill that slot. I think there's no difference in terms of his ball progression to that of a Gabriel, who's the second centre-back of Arsenal.
I disagree.
I think I would say, and this is what's been happening off air, guys. By the way, I would, in terms of Gabriel, I would say Gabriel is better on the ball than Mark Guehi. But I do believe that this is a perfect step for Mark Guehi in his career right now. For him himself, I think this is the perfect time for him to take that step up. Newcastle United will be really disappointed they couldn't emulate the season before and get in Champions League. But the aspirations and what they're trying to build there. It's not just Champions League, they want to be winning league titles, within the next however many years. They're building a fantastic project there at Newcastle. And I think it goes hand in hand with an aspiring player who's on the way up, with a club with a similar direction who's on the way up, more responsibility, playing in bigger games that mean more at the higher end of the league, competing for Europe and so on. And that's no disrespect to Crystal Palace because he's absolutely had a fantastic ground in there, giving them really good years of service. And now, if this deal does happen with a third bid, if it does get accepted, going to give them a nice transfer fee as well. So I think it actually works out for all parties. And I hear what you're saying about the evolution of Newcastle United, but certainly for now, the mid to short term, I think can go hand in hand. He's a warrior, he's physical. You look at how that Newcastle United team plays now with physical players. They're on the front foot. They want to engage in duels all over the park, is what Eddie Howe loves. That's Mark Guehi can do that. So actually, I think playing style-wise now, I think it's perfect.
I think the disagreement began because Kwaku said Gabriel, so he said Mark Guehi is better than Gabriel in all aspects, and I said I completely disagree. And so this is where I kind of say, like, if this is the stopgap between them being this progressive football inside, then if Guehi's already progressed beyond Gabriel, this signing doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but I would say that if you put Mark Guehi in a Liverpool team, a team that you follow very closely, if you put him next to Virgil van Dijk, he wouldn't look out of place. And this is a Liverpool team that playing Champions League.
That's a Virgil van Dijk situation.
And this is where they started saying, you can put Virgil van Dijk next to, I don't know,
next to
a
me.
player off the top, Robert Hoof, and they'll just win the league. Sorry, Robert, but...
Sorry, Robert.
That was just the first random player that comes to my head. But, that's where we started disagreeing.
Yeah.
But I get both points, but I just think, actually... this is just a really good time for Mark Guehi. His stock has risen. He's gone into an England team with massive demands and massive pressure from playing at Palace and probably with the least expectation. And now we've come out of it with the most surprise. And everybody's now looking at Mark Guehi, apart from Palace fans who would have known this all along, and going, this guy is ready. Yeah.
Just looking at the contract length, you mentioned this as well, Kwaku, that he's 18 months away from discussing pre-contracts with teams abroad and 2 years away from leaving on a free. Valuation-wise, that second bid that was rejected is believed to be about £50 million. Palace valuing him at £65 million. What do you make of that?
Entitled to do it. I think if that is your commodity, that is your player that you deem is so important to you, and you know that they're hot property. Like I said, he's just gone to the Euros. As soon as a player goes on an international level, because that's usually a question mark, isn't it? Either Champions League or world stage or European stage. And Mark Guehi's just gone and shown that in these pressure games, I'm fine. I'm going to play exactly the same game I've been playing at Palace, so I can cope. That adds value. The fact that Palace have quite a few players who are very valuable. Elise's just gone. You look at the price tag that Eze would be. Anderson a little less so, but he's a senior player there, and now Guehi puts them in a strong position. They don't have to sell him now. Of course, like you're saying, they do need to think further ahead. Would you get much more than 65, 70 million for Guehi if you leave it a little longer? So I get that, but they make good financial decisions at Crystal Palace, it seems. But I think they're well within their rights to command this sort of fee. Jared Brantwaite, Manchester United went in for a couple of bids there. They're demanding in excess of 60, 70 million pounds. Mark Guehi, in my eyes, is around the same ballpark figure. That is the market.
Money in football's gone mad. 65 million is cheap. What's happening?
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, weren't we? Millions. These are millions. Big money in football. Right, we're going to get to Manchester City now and to Ben Ransom, who is going to be speaking to Pep Guardiola later this afternoon. Oh, great to see you, Ben. Now, you'll be speaking to Pep later, no doubt. plenty of questions about whether they're going to replace Alvarez or not.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll be the pertinent question, because obviously it was a huge deal which we brought you on Sky Sports a little bit earlier on this week, when we found out that Julian Alvarez not only had these talks with Atletico Madrid, but they had agreed a fee with Manchester City to take him there for something in the region of 81, 82 million, depending on where you exchange your euro to the Great British pound. So it's a huge deal for Manchester City when you consider that they're going to make such a huge profit on him just a couple of years after signing him for £14 million, something in the region, if all the add-on clauses and performance-related clauses are met, profit in the region of £70 million. What it does do, though, of course, is it leaves a potential hole in the Manchester City squad, because as much as Julian Alvarez was a deputy to Erling Haaland, he was always going to be unlikely to displace him from the starting 11. He has proved an able deputy, both in Haaland's absence and playing alongside him in a deeper role when Kevin De Bruyne was injured for a large part of last season. This is a player that scored 36 goals for Manchester City during his 2 seasons. So he was a really important part of what they've done over the last couple of years. His departure, though, they're still well stocked, don't get me wrong. Will they go back in for a player who can play up front, someone perhaps who can play in that number 10 role? It's a fascinating and intriguing question considering their options, and I'm sure it is something that we'll be asking Pep Guardiola when he sits down behind me at 1:30.
Yeah, looking forward to it. We'll speak to you later. Thanks, Ben. OK, plenty more coming up after the break. We're going to discuss our next huge story, Tottenham making moves for Dominic Solanke.
the consistency of the goals and just how much he carried Spurs. But Dominic Solanke had the season of his life last year. Scored 19 league goals, played every single league game for Bournemouth, as they performed above expectations. And I expect him to kick on. There's a reason why, obviously, he came through Chelsea's academy, was heralded as one of the most promising striking prospects in the country. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him at Chelsea, as with a lot of those players in that generation. He went to Liverpool. Obviously, Jurgen Klopp saw something in him in 2017. Unfortunately, that didn't materialise. Took a step back, went to Bournemouth and found himself. In the Championship, he scored a lot of goals. And last year in the Premier League, he, as a 26-year-old, scored 19, which is no mean feat. There's a lot of players who scored less goals than him in the Premier League, such as a Heung-min Son or a Mo Salah. So he's a player that I really like, and I think technically he's of the level. And last year he played in the Bournemouth team that were playing good progressive football. And so assimilated into an Ange Postecoglou side who do play good football, but maybe a bit more dynamic. I expect him to settle in. So it's a big signing for Spurs because they do need goals in that team. And it's been goals by committee ever since Harry Kane left. But I think that Dominic Solanke will fill those boots and be a great striker for the club if he does sign.
Do you think, if you're a Spurs fan, this would be an exciting signing, a good fit for them?
I think this is my opinion, but I think it could split some Spurs fans. I think maybe some of them may feel initially underwhelmed. And even as a neutral, some neutrals could look at this deal and say, I'm not really sure about that. But I don't know, I kind of look at that with a little bit of optimism in terms of Spurs got a recent track record of bringing through some players to the football club that actually, they may not be household names or completely established in their careers or where they want to be, but then they've arrived at Spurs and you're starting to see some really good things from him, like Mickey van der Ven, the goalkeeper Vicario. You look at Pedro Porro, you look at what Udogi's been doing since he's been there. These are players that have come to Spurs and are starting to elevate their games. And I think that he has a lot of attributes that actually could be really, really useful for Ange Postecoglou's system, and that Spurs fans actually, who maybe were not sure about this because he's only had one season at this level, that could really turn their heads, I think.
How does he compare to Richarlison?
I mean, I'm very excited for this because as football fans, you often watch things and you're hoping that the stats back what you see. The stats back what I see. I sort of looked at Solanke and I thought, I really like Richarlison. I also really love Solanke as well. But I felt that there was a lot of similarities between the two. So I looked at the heat maps and they are incredibly similar. Both forwards that want to be in and around the penalty area. Obviously, Solanke last season played more football, scored more goals. So his map is obviously a little more red in the penalty area. But generally, they also float around. They want to pick the ball up in various other areas. They're not just box strikers. They're also not the sort of Firmino type of strikers that drop in. So I thought, let's look a little deeper than beyond the heat map, because the heat map is pretty obvious to judge. But when you look at the stats and you think about how similar they may be, and this is where I think Spurs have an interesting problem. Two £60 million strikers, both want to play a lot of football. Obviously, Richarlison played less football last season. If you look at their XG, very similar. The non-penalty XG also similar. Solanke did take some penalties for Bournemouth last season. Their shot-creating actions, now Solanke's at 79, Richarlison's at 34, but Solanke played twice as many games. So if you multiply Richarlison's by 2, you can do the maths, it's 68. And so it's very, very similar. So I thought, let's look a little bit deeper, because I look at these two and I think both of them can drop off. They can receive the ball at their feet. They can hold defenders off. They're willing to be physical. Richarlison may be a little more than Solanke, but Solanke showed last season that he can also do that as well. Aerially, they're both absolutely fine. Win flick on. So I thought, what's their pass completion like? Also very, very similar. So all in all, you're sort of going, what separates the two? I even went as deep as aerial duels 1 and thought, that's pretty impressive from Solanke, but Richarlison scored 3 headed goals last season. Solanke scored 4. In my opinion, they're very similar as two forwards, and I think Ange Postecoglou at this point has to say, who's my main man here? If I'm going to sign him for 60 million, I can't put him on the left-hand side because Son's there. Richarlison doesn't really suit playing off the right-hand side. So ultimately, he's got to pick between these two, and they are very similar profiles. Two guys that will get you goals, but can also be a little bit, let's say, erratic in front of goal at times, especially Richarlison, who's got a little bit of a reputation for that. But I do think overall, Ange will decide on Solanke once he signs him. And I sort of go, it's a predicament. Just look, they are essentially identical. So if you're Ange Postecoglou and you bring in Solanke this summer, are you willing to say to Richarlison, it's time for you to go?
Especially after he's just done a post saying, I am home.
Yeah, there's that as well.
Exactly, but you need options up top. everybody expected Højlund to be Manchester United's primary option as a striker going into this season, but still brought in Xerxes. Man City have let go of Julian Alvarez, and everyone's talking about who they're going to bring in to replace him, even though that person knows they're going to be second fiddle to Erling Haaland. So in the Premier League, where there are so many games, it is so rigorous, you need multiple options. You don't know when someone's going to go down with an injury. Solanke played a lot of football last season. It's going to be his first season at that level, playing under Postecoglou, who's quite a demanding manager. And so having both of those options, I think, fits Spurs for where they're at right now. Of course, players get frustrated, and with a season or two, one of them might decide that the future lays elsewhere. But for this upcoming season where Spurs have got Europa League football, I think that having both of those as options, who can offer different things, despite the fact that he points out the similarities, is a good thing for Tottenham.
The one thing I would say is that is very, very good, and something that Flex spoke about. Spurs' talent ID recently has been very good. Like they've essentially just chosen Solanke alongside Richarlison and said, we're going to pick between these two. What I think you love as a football fan is to go, I can see the style, I can see the identity. Both high pressers, both want to press defenders, both want to be horrible to play against. Oftentimes, if they went for Tony, which has been rumoured, I think you're looking at chalk and cheese there, two very different styles of players. So that in itself is a very, very good positive for Spurs.
Just on what Richarlison said on social media about I am home, and, you know, the money was big, but my dreams are bigger in terms of the interest he had from the Middle East. What did you think about that?
It's a bold statement, and it's a big move, not because the whole world was waiting to see what Richarlison would decide, and I mean that with respect, but in terms of once you go on record as saying that and making your intentions really known, usually that comes with expectation, and it comes with, OK, we need you to back this up. Like, you really want to be here. It's your home. You turn down a lot of money because this is your dream. This is what you want. And as fans, yes, you want to see commitment from players. You want to see players, you know, come out and make things very, very clear. But then after that, you want to see action. So if you're a Spurs fan, you're going to be looking at Richarlison saying, OK, you've made some massive statements. Thank you for turning down interest from Saudi Arabia or whatnot. But when you play, I want to see results. I want to see expectation being met. I want to see you scoring goals. I want to see you on the front foot. And so does Ange Postecoglou, by the way. Fans is one thing, but, you know, Ange Postecoglou will be happy to have, I think, Richarlison as an option. I think if Dominic Solanke does come in, he will be the prime striker, the starter. But he will have to deliver, and I think the longer he goes without delivering, or if he, unfortunately for him, has more injury problems, can't get some continuity, that can become an issue. But for right now, I think what the lads are saying is really correct. There's options there. Something may have to give in the future, but right now it puts Tottenham in a far better position they were than last year.
Just elsewhere, AC Milan close to agreeing a deal with Tottenham for right-back Emerson Royal. Talks are continuing today on this, and according to Sky in Italy, the fee is expected to be £12.8 million plus bonuses on top. Quakey, this one seems to make sense for both parties.
It does. If you look at it from the AC Milan point of view, we've got Davide Calabria, who's their captain and starts as right-back for them, but Alessandro Florenzi's down with an ACL injury, got injured in pre-season, so they're really down to one starting right-back at AC Milan. And Emerson Royal, I know that he's had his critiques, but more than anything, he's versatile. He can play, last season played more games at left-back than he did at right-back, and he played some games at centre-back as well. And so it makes sense for AC Milan to target a player that's kind of out of favour at Spurs. I think that it's the right time for him to leave. And I talked about it in the first show about physicality. Of course, I said I lack that in comparison to these top-level footballers.
You've gained it since that show.
I have. It's talking to you guys, really. But he's a player that can do a lot in terms of his physical attributes in a league like Serie A, which favours players like that who've got physicality. So I think he'll do a good job there. And the deal, like you said, Bella, makes sense for both parties because at the moment, his time's kind of done at Spurs. And I think at AC Milan, he can kind of find himself in different roles where he can utilise his skills, and it'll put him at the fore and maybe reinvent his career or restart his career, because at Spurs, he's kind of reached his limit.
What do you make of the business that Spurs have done so far? Is there anywhere else that you think they need to be looking?
I think they're in a good position, probably a centre-back, because last season they had the problem with injuries. If Mickey van der Ven picks up another serious injury, you hope he doesn't. They had bought in Dragushin, but then they were playing, as Quaker just said, Emerson Royal played at centre-back along with Ben Davis. I remember that happened for about 3 or 4 games.
Against Manchester City, and they did it right.
Yeah, and they did do well in that game, to be fair to them. But I do think maybe in that area, potentially a backup left-back, because Udogie potentially could pick up an injury. But overall, I think their squad's in a much better place than it has been in previous years, and I think they've slowly built this squad to this position. I'm actually really excited to watch Ange Postecoglou's Spurs side play football, because a lot of people were criticising them last season, saying particularly Manchester United fans, I remember hearing this man say they play this high-line football and they get praised for it. Why do they? Because they play exciting football.
Yeah, exciting.
Well,
It's
want to be excited.
got to produce trophies and it's got to produce end products. That's what it's got to produce.
You've won lots of those recently.
We'll there you go.
Flex is just waiting for the Zubimendi chat, isn't he? OK, next we are going to turn our attentions to West Ham and our huge transfer story, the third one of the day. Have they done enough to convince Jean-Clair Todibo to join the club? We'll be back in a few minutes. Hi, welcome back. Big developments at West Ham today. They've agreed a deal with Nice for the signing of defender Jean-Clair Todibo. This deal is an initial loan with an option to buy for £34 million. So he's on his way to London. He's going to have a medical soon. Kwaku, West Ham have been busy, haven't they? Do you think this is the kind of player that they need?
Definitely. If you look at West Ham's business this summer, it's been very, very impressive. Credit to Tim Stuyton, who's been the orchestrator of that technical advisor who they brought in from Bayer Leverkusen last summer. And look at the list of players there. They could populate some of the best teams in the country. Look at Max Kilman, who I think is a great player, potentially West Ham captain for years to come. Somerville was a great player, maybe too good for the Championship last season. I really like what I've seen from Nicholas Füllkrug, especially over the last season and at the Euros as well. And so they're a team that are developing and building, and they want to play more progressive football, hence bringing in Lopetegui. And I think that Todibo is just going to add to that. Potentially, Kurt Zouma could be moving to Saudi Arabia, and so they need to reinforce that defensive line. And this is a Todibo that, when he was younger, he was so heralded, and a player that is talented with the ball at his feet and is also physically imposing. So I expect him to slot into West Ham perfectly. And like I said, a lot of credit goes to Tim Steidten, because he's a player that could have gone to Juventus, Manchester United, but he's chosen West Ham.
OK, we're going to come back to West Ham in just a moment. But first, we need to get to Jeremy Langton, because we are counting down to the start of the new EFL season. You've been seeing this all day on Sky Sports News. You can see more games than ever before on Sky Sports and Sky Sports Plus as well. So the next team we're heading to is Millwall to join Jeremy.
Yes, hello. And Millwall finished last season like a train. They won 5 straight games. They finished in 13th. The question is, can they start the new season the way they finished the last? Neil, what do you reckon?
Well, I certainly hope so, Jez. Look, it was a brilliant time coming in last year. A difficult moment for the football club, February the 22nd. We had a great run. We don't take it for granted, though. You know, I've explained to the guys upstairs as well as the guys in the changing room, that was an end-of-season run that can happen. Starting from afresh is a completely different challenge, and we have to be ready for it.
You've done some business in the window, Neil, but have you done enough? Macaulay Langstaff has come in. He's scored a hatful of goals, but can he do that in the Championship?
Well, look, we're going to be extremely patient with Macca. His pedigree is fantastic. Scored a lot of goals in League Two last year, a lot of goals in National League before that, National League North. But it can take time to adapt. So we're extremely patient with him. We hope he hits the ground running and scores goals immediately. Obviously, Japhet Tanganga came in also as an outfield player and done brilliantly for me at the end of the season. So he was a huge signing for us. He's a really, really good player at this level. And then a couple of goalkeepers as well. So we know we've got some work to do. You know, we're a little bit short in certain areas of the pitch, especially at the top end. But, you know, sometimes, you know, for us as a football club, we have to be patient.
Yeah, how challenging is the market been, Neil, and what more do you need to do?
Challenging for us as a club as always, trying to compete with some of the big hitters in the league, and certainly the guys with the parachute payments is difficult. Trying to get better than what we got. You know, it's not always easy as well, because we feel like we've got some good players in the building, and I'm really pleased with the group that we have got. It's just adding maybe that little bit of flair, a little bit of quality, and sometimes that costs the money. So the recruitment guys are trying really hard for me to add to my group. In the meantime, we battle on with what we got, and we certainly look forward to tomorrow.
Sean Hutchinson has come back. It looked like he was leaving. What was the story there?
Look, sometimes, Jez, as you know, with experience, deals just take time to get there. Sometimes it has to be right for the player, but not just for the player. I'm not talking about financial deals with Hutch. He's a Millwall man, and he's been here a long time. I signed him, I think, 9 years ago now. He's more like family orientated as well. So, you know, a little bit of sort of decision making around that for us and for him. But the thought process from me and Hutch was for him to always be here and be club captain.
Neil, you've had to deal with the loss of Matija Sarkic. How have the players and you dealt with that? And what's it going to be like at the Den tomorrow?
Well, it's a great opportunity for us tomorrow to pay tribute to Matija for his life, and also for him as a Millwall goalkeeper. It was heartbreaking a couple of months ago when we found out, and none more so than for his family. Like devastating as a father myself. I can't put myself in his mum and dad's shoes, or even his partner Phoebe. You know what that moment is like. Very difficult for us. I can't praise the football club and the players highly enough for how they've dealt with it and how we've coped so far. It's going to be a huge loss for us as a football club. Tomorrow we're going to remember him. We're going to do it in the best way we know as a football club. Everyone will stand together, and we can hope. You know, we hope that we do him justice on the pitch in tomorrow's game.
Yeah, there's a mural, isn't there? His family are coming over. It's going to be quite an emotional day, isn't it?
It will be. It will be emotional. It'll be emotional for us. We have to use that emotion to push us forward as a football club. The mural that's gone into the Coldblow Lane end is a fantastic gesture by the supporters club. Our supporters have paid for that, for it to be done. It's a brilliant piece of art, and something that the fans are going to be able to remember Matty for. The family are travelling over to be with us on the day, and it's a great opportunity for everyone to stand together and remember Matty and what a loss he's going to be to not just our football club, to the football industry, but also Montenegro as an FA.
Just finally, Neil, Watford on the opening day, how's it going to go?
positive, I hope. Look, we've had a good pre-season. Look, you're seeing it being here today, the atmosphere, the culture, the environment that we've created in such a short space of time is phenomenal. You know, the players are brilliant in attitude and application, desire. We had a great run last year. We carry that momentum for sure. It's pretty much a London derby. It'll be a decent crowd. We're going to remember Matija, Sarkic. The atmosphere will be flying tomorrow. That we have to use that momentum.
Neil, great to see you and good luck for the season. Neil Harris of Millwall as they prepare for Watford and to honour Matija Sarkic.
Thanks ever so much, Jeremy. OK, we have got some breaking news to bring you. It's regarding West Ham and Jean-Clair Todibo. He is now in London. He's already had the first part of his medical, so this one is moving very quickly indeed for the signing of the Nice defender. So, Kwaku, we mentioned, didn't we, that he had been travelling to London with West Ham's technical director, Tim Stuyton, and it's understood that he's the one who held these lengthy talks with Todibo to convince him to go to the club.
Yeah, it seems like he was instrumental in the deal. He's been instrumental in a lot of the deals that West Ham have done in recent transfer windows, and he's a man that deserves a lot of credit. He was the architect of that Leverkusen team that went on to be so successful last season. And Todibo is just, it's a coup. We were talking about it in the break, and Flex was like, West Ham are cooking, and they really are comparatively to the rest of the Premier League teams, especially because they've not got European football next season. So they're building an incredible squad. Of course, they probably have to offload some players, and there's still some areas of the team they need to improve on, fullbacks most notably. But they're building a very, very formidable side that should be competing for a place in the top 6, top 7 next season. And so Tim Stuyton deserves a lot of credit for that. Of course, we have to see how they play, because this is all theoretical, right? This is all based on the transfers or the signings that they've made. And it doesn't always work out. We've seen teams go big in transfer windows before and not work out for them. But in terms of who's winning the summer when it comes to signings, West Ham are in pole position, and they've stolen the march on a lot of top teams, because they've signed players that will be coveted by other top sides, and we know that they've got quality in that squad already. Jarrod Bowen scored a lot of goals last season. Mohamed Kudus is a great, great player. Paqueta, we know that he's had his issues off the pitch, but when he's on the pitch, he's amazing. And so West Ham are building from a position of strength, and I expect them to go again and bring in more players to even bolster the squad even further.
I do wonder about the transition from David Moyes' football, where you have Jarrod Bowen and Kudus as your sort of counter-attack guys, and you sit in and you soak up, to now transition towards Lopetegui. And I don't actually think the sort of styles are too dissimilar, but when you bring in progressive players, I don't think that front four is going to say, actually, you know what, Gaffer, like we're more than happy to drop in and do a shift, because now we've got these other players and the quality's improved at the back. So I'm interested to see if they can transition to maybe a more exciting style, and if they do, then I think we'll see a very different West Ham.
I just think with all of that that we've just spoken about, which I agree with both the boys, that as a West Ham fan, you're looking at this and it's like what we've seen from West Ham fans is sort of, I think, like a sort of a raising of the bar. You know, OK, we've come into this new stadium. Yes, David Moyes has given us a European trophy that many West Ham fans thought they wouldn't see in their lifetime. Unbelievable. But there was a feeling amongst the fan base, it seemed that I was observing, that they felt that we can be more than this. Why should we? You know, there was a sort of pushback from neutral saying, well, West Ham, how much higher than 7th could you really go? How much higher than 6th could you really go? And West Ham fans are entitled to say, hang on a minute, this is our football club. We want to push into Champions League. Aston Villa have done it. Leicester tried to knock on the door and do it for a couple of seasons. Tottenham have now become into the traditional top 4 or / top 6, whatever we keep. Now soon it's going to be top 8, including Manchester United. But you've got to get us in there. Yeah, top 8, mate. But what West Ham fans are looking at now is a real sort of structure and new people in the front, in the door, that are going in the right direction. They're buying exciting players. They've now got a manager in who has a fantastic history and has got pedigree, as David Moyes took them to a natural ceiling. And it's really, really exciting times. This is a big player to get, Jean-Clair Todibo.
Yeah, he's
massive.
He's a huge player.
On top of the play, Mohamed Kudus.
Yeah, this is
massive.
the thing. They've been busy in the window, but also kept hold of key players as well, haven't they? And you guys have been looking at some of their options going forward. Yeah,
I mean, we were basically speaking about a potential 11, and we saw Wan-Bissaka at right back, because we were saying off air, where can they improve fullbacks? Immediately we said Wan-Bissaka. Emerson Palmieri's been a revelation for him. He's been brilliant. And then you have Naif Agard as a centre-back with Kilman as an option, Todibo. Ariola's a great goalkeeper. As you move further up the pitch, it just gets better and better and better. And you were saying about Edson Alvarez and how he could have worked at Manchester United. Yeah. He's at West Ham. How will they fit the midfielders in? We were sort of trying to discover and figure out what that looks like. Paqueta and Kudus in there. I mean, it's a phenomenal team.
It's frightening.
It is frightening, but if you look at the 22-23 season, West Ham fans can't complain about the board not spending money. They've gone big in transfer windows before, but the biggest issue before Tim Starson walked through the door was misprofiling players. They did that massively. If you look at the summer of 22-23 when they brought in Paqueta, which obviously worked out because he's a quality player, but Scamacca didn't work out. They misprofiled him as a big man where he's more of a player that drops into spaces and can run in behind as well. Now forget who now in hindsight it's worked out because they played more progressive football, but under David Moyes that didn't work because he didn't fit the style of play. Maxwell Cornet, who hasn't worked out. Tilo Kehrer, who's been on various loans because it didn't work. So West Ham now have got a technical director who knows the players that fit with the style of football that the manager wants to play, and they're reaping the rewards of it. Of course, we need to see the football played, but I expect West Ham to have a very, very big
We
season.
said, actually, Kwaku asked the question, is this West Ham team better than Chelsea's 11? And I said, yeah, in a heartbeat, and you agreed.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is a testament to their recruitment and their identity and the
It's a
style.
big shout,
that
that.
No, yeah, definitely. In terms
When
of
everyone's fit.
When everybody's fit, but with Chelsea, this is not a Chelsea topic, but with Chelsea, we don't know what their starting 11 is going to be. If you ask 100 Chelsea fans, Chelsea's best 11, you're getting 100 different answers. With West Ham, we've kind of made the team there in terms of who fits into where, and I think that very quickly, within 2 or 3 games, we'll know what Julian Lopetegui's strongest team is, and they can play that week in, week out with no European football, and that's why we all expect big things for them.
It's a scary team, really scary
I
team.
like that. Throw that to the viewers. Who's got the better squad? Chelsea with 1 million players or West Ham now?
Right.
And
Are
we're
you
waiting to see them
producing
play.
this show, are you?
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
OK, we've got some further breaking news to bring you. Dennis Undav has joined Stuttgart in a permanent move from Brighton. This is for an undisclosed terms and fee. He spent last season on loan with the club, but he's joined Stuttgart now permanently. OK, it could be a busy week or so for Arsenal. Will they be signing a midfielder? Plus, we've got news from Manchester United. Hi there, welcome back. Some breaking news just reaching us that talks are ongoing between Fulham and Aston Villa. This is over the signing of defender Diego Carlos. Fulham have had one bid rejected. Outcome of talks will decide if they go back in with an improved offer. Fulham looking to strengthen in that area following the departures of Tosin and Tim Ream. Flex, when we mentioned that in the break, you went pretty high-pitched, actually. So what do you think of this?
That's an interesting one. I just remember when Carlos was, on his way to Aston Villa and how they tracked him and really wanted him, and he came in and got a big injury, so couldn't really get going, and Aston Villa moved in a different direction after Steven Gerrard, etc. So I just didn't expect that one to materialise so quickly, but they have moved on, and actually I think that could be a good move. I think he could do well for Fulham.
I've got to be honest, Bella's talking to someone in their ear and somehow listened to everything was
I know.
Yeah. And we were whispering. We were like, hopefully we don't get caught. I think it'll be a good signing because he's a physical centre-back. They'll miss Tosin because he's been there for a long time. They'll miss Tim Ream. One of my friends who's a huge Fulham fan was saying he's one of those guys that they've had for a long time. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely a transition period for them because they also lost João Palhinha as well. So it'll be interesting to see how Fulham are next season. But I do think it's an adequate replacement.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the right move for Diego Carlos. There was so much excitement, you're right, when he joined Aston Villa. I remember West Ham and Newcastle being after him in the previous January.
It was seen as a coup, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And he came in and Steven Gerrard made him one of the vice-captains before he'd even played the Premier League game. Got a tore his Achilles in, I think, 3 games into the season, and was just never really the same. Like you say, Villa moved in a different direction. Players like Pau Torres, the re-emergence of other centre-backs as well. So they're a club that are making interesting moves, and they're making interesting sales as well. It's interesting that they turned down that initial bid from Fulham, but they're getting money for players they don't want anymore. We saw Diaby go to the Middle East, go to Saudi for a lot of money. So they know what they're doing, Aston Villa, and they need to trim the squad, especially with Champions League football in this way. So I expect that move to happen in terms of Carlos' move to Fulham, and for both parties, it makes sense.
Right, let's talk Manchester United, guys. They've held initial discussions for Burnley's Sander Berge. This is as they're weighing up their midfield options. What do you think of Berge as an option then?
I think it's an interesting one, not one that, in my opinion, I saw coming, if I'm honest with you. And how I spoke about Dominic Solanke and his perception at Spurs is this could be a similar one amongst the Manchester United fan base, in my opinion. I feel like it might not be a name that many Manchester United fans would have gone into the transfer window saying, I'll tell you what, there's a really good option there. Burnley have been relegated. Let's go and get Sander Berge. But I think this is where you've got to trust what Ineos are trying to do if they do bring him in. Sometimes it's not about the huge, massive signings for the big money. It's about really looking at the player profile, really looking at the players you have and how they can complement what you're trying to build and who they can work alongside. And if you look at Sander Berge, what he is good at is, recovering the ball and giving the ball to players who would want to probably play a little bit more defensively sound, and this probably isn't a good parameter to go off, but I remember last season Manchester United played Burnley at Old Trafford. He looked very good, but Manchester United midfield last season was very poor. And, in 66 games in his time in the Premier League, you can see they're obviously not a prolific goal scorer or chief creator, but in terms of tackles and regaining the ball, 114, so that's something he excels in, and interceptions at 37 in 66 games, just over half. So you're looking at him and saying, that's what he gives you. So if you put that into a Manchester United side, somebody who can regain possession, win the ball back, then you're giving the ball to Kobe Mainoo, you're giving the ball to Bruno Fernandes to go and do what they do best. So overall, it might not be the most glamorous name, but actually we're challenging Ineos to be creative, not get value for money, look for people who can actually help the squad with what we've got, and maybe this could be the answer.
I just think not every signing needs to be a hit in the sense that Scott McTominay may leave for, I think there's talk about 25, 30 million. You do still have to fill that void in the squad. This might be a cheap option, and then you never know what could happen. I think Manchester United will link to Adrian Rabiot aggressively for a couple of windows. I say aggressively because I remember talking about it for a lot of days.
Last 3 or 4 windows.
Yeah, and I was constantly on sort of the train that was saying, this isn't a bad signing. Not every signing is going to be Yusuf Fofana, or some players are necessary for what you need. So it speaks to what Flex is saying.
It's a complementary piece as well, because you've landed on gold with Kobe Mainoo. Carrington has done it again in terms of producing a top quality player. You expect him to be world class if he's not already in years to come. And you look at Bruno, who's again prolific when it comes to output. So Sander Berge as that anchor in midfield, again, I love this word, but physicality, 6'3", 6'4". He's a player that can add a lot in terms of this Manchester United midfield. He needs to improve in terms of progressing the ball into the final third, and I think he will do that. But in terms of what Man United are looking for in terms of that number 6 who's got that physicality and strength, I think he fits the role.
OK, we're going to head to North London now. Marseille expected to reopen talks with Arsenal over the signing of Eddie Nketiah. There is a gap in valuation, but a feeling that it's not insurmountable. Nketiah's open to a move, so personal terms not expected to be a problem. Marseille have had 2 bids rejected. We've spoken about how a move for Nketiah seems inevitable. He's going to want first-team football, isn't he? Which brings me on to Reiss Nelson, because he's found great game time limited as well. He wants to be playing regularly. He was the only outfield player not to play any minutes of the game against Bayer Leverkusen. Leicester City have held talks with Arsenal over him. Would that be a good move for him?
He's very familiar with Steve Cooper, having worked with him at the youth levels at England. So it would make sense, and especially in terms of what Leicester have lost in Keane and Dewsbury Hall. Different players, Reiss Nelson and Dewsbury Hall, but both play in the final third. And Leicester needs to add bodies. I know that Fatou, the deal has been made permanent, and they've got players in the attacking third. But I feel like coming up to the Premier League, a player who's got Premier League experience, who's got something to prove, which I think is one of the most potent aspects of it, I think the move makes sense for both parties. Arsenal are now trying to sell and trying to become a better selling club as a Manchester United in this window. And so moving a player like Reiss Nelson, which will represent a lot of profit via PSR, makes sense. And I think that move should get done. He's a player that has showed he's got quality. We just need to see it on a regular basis. So we might see that at Leicester team that need a player to play in the attacking third for him.
Well, there were a number of European clubs interested as well, but as it stands, the preference is to stay in the Premier League. Can you see why there's been so much interest in him?
I mean, I think it's difficult when a player's so in and out of the team. Like we've seen in glimpses, I remember the Bournemouth goal that he scored that everyone will remember. Arsenal fans love him and say he's got so much potential, but when you're competing against Bukayo Saka, who's potentially one of the best wingers in the world, you're not going to get game time, and Saka never gets injured. So it's one of those where I think it's really difficult for us to sit here and say he can do this, this and this at Leicester. But there has been moments, you've seen glimpses of quality that he's got, and when you're down there in a relegation battle, which Leicester probably will be, and our producer will hate to hear that, what you want from a winger is to just be positive, and he is positive. He wants to run at fullbacks. You want players that can cause problems, and I think he can bring that to Leicester.
Arsenal also still interested in the Real Sociedad midfielder Mikel Merino. There's no formal bid, but it's understood that Merino is keen on this move as well. He's got a year left on his contract. Do you think this will be a good one for Arsenal?
I mean, I've said many, many times about Spanish midfielders from the Basque region, lots of potential. Mikel Merino, I think, has for a while been a player that a lot of clubs have looked at. Arsenal have missed the Granit Xhaka role for a long time, and I don't think he feels it quite the same way, but he's such a technical player. He's dominant in duels, and I won't pretend to do an Arteta impression, but he loves duel winners. So I think, all in all, it's a signing that probably is the cherry on top of the cake, and I felt like when they signed Declan Rice last season, didn't quite make it. This might be the one that makes it, but Arsenal are doing such good business.
Is he better than Zubimendi, though?
Oh, you had to get that in.
Who would you rather have at Liverpool?
I'm going to have to walk off set, because Zubimendi's the guy.
Does this one make sense for you? Is this a smart signing?
It is a smart signing, but Arsenal they're caught in two minds, really, because they signed Declan Rice to be a number 6. Found out pretty early on that he can't necessarily do that role in terms of picking the ball up from the centre-backs and progressing it into final third. Way more effective as number 8, who can roam and be a bit more free and also be a bit more physical. And so for last season, Arsenal played Jorginho as number 6, and then when Thomas Partey was fit towards the back end of the season, looked really good with him, Rice and Odegaard. But I think Arsenal still do need that number 6, and I don't think Mikel Merino kind of fits that. He's somewhere in between a 6 and 8, which I suppose is a 7, but not really. And so I feel that Arsenal probably still needs to go and do business to bring in that stalwart in midfield that a lot of teams are looking for this summer.
What do you think the big deal is to look over the weekend? We've had some massive ones today. Yeah. Todibo, Solanke.
There's only one deal. Yeah. Zubi.
I
can't wait till he ends up at Chelsea. Honestly, I can't.
We've clipped up a montage of Nabe talking about Zubimendi, which you can catch next week, actually, because Good Morning Transfers will be back next week with the team on Monday from 9 o'clock in the morning. And then, as usual, Transfer Talk at midday will be returning as well from Monday. And And tonight, don't forget, you can catch a full roundup of all of the day's news. The transfer show will be on at 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock this evening right here on Sky Sports News. We'll stay with Sky Sports News. Coming up next, we are going to hear live from Manchester City head coach Pep Guardiola ahead of the Community Shield.